Appreciate everybody being here today. I am Denzel Burnside, the Executive Director of the North Carolina Housing Table, and I am excited to be able to be joined with you all today and to talk about some very, very exciting work that is being done in our state and share in that dialogue today with our two guests, Ryan Carter and Jenn Weaver, who are becoming, I like to be colleague friends that I can call and pull on areas way beyond my own skill set. So I will allow them to introduce themselves. I guess I will defer to first Ryan and then Jenn after, and then we can go ahead and get started. So Ryan, I'll turn it over to you.
Hey everyone, Ryan Carter. I'm the policy director at Catawba Riverkeeper. Also the director of a regional alliance of conservation groups called Piedmont Promise. Happy to be here today.
I'm so happy to be here. I'm Jenn Weaver, and I am the Transportation Policy and Outreach Coordinator at the Southern Environmental Law Center.
Today's conversation I'm looking forward to sits at the direct intersection of housing and transportation. And so I'm excited to be able to allow my friend Ryan Carter to break it down and give us a whole class on parking lots and how that affects our work in housing. And then after Jenn will come in and give us a more thorough understanding of how that looks from her lens of work with the SELC as well as clean connected communities. So Ryan, the time is yours.
Great. Thanks, Denzel. And again, thank you everyone for being here, for allowing me the chance to talk. I'll share my bit, particularly on the environmental side of things. I know Jen will kind of give it another unique perspective. In North Carolina, the number one source of aquatic pollution comes from runoff. Runoff comes from what we call impervious surface. Everyone else calls it parking lots. Now, there's some nuance there, of course, but parking lots is the main source of runoff. And so about 3 years ago, we started asking questions about who has beef with parking lots. Why do you not like parking lots? What's restrictive about parking lots? Why are there so many damn parking lots? What are the impacts that we're seeing of these parking lots? And so from that conversation that happened about 120 different times, we found that there were three things that kind of came together around frustrations with parking lots. And that became House Bill 369. And I can drop a link to the bill webpage right here. There were several iterations of the bill, but as it currently stands, this bill really dives into it is a compromise between a lot of different stakeholders in the name of flood risk reduction. And one of the big components of that is eliminating parking minimums statewide. So I'll give two other documents, and I think I'll probably stop early because I think Jen's got some other really interesting points, more nuanced about parking minimums. And so I definitely don't want to steal any of her thunder. That first link that I share, that's the second link, that's our overview of the bill. And then this last link shows a map of a lot of parking lots in North Carolina. We had a great team of volunteers spend over 450 hours mapping out parking lots in North Carolina. And in the top left corner, you'll see there's a tab for layers that shows different things. So impaired waterways, those are designated as the state as, quote, polluted. You've got another layer that shows MS4 permits. These are local governments that we want to have empowered to address runoff so that they can reduce their impact not only on their water resources, but the resources of their downstream neighbors. So a lot of interesting layers there to play around with. I'm a registered lobbyist, and I've showed that to many a legislator, and I've turned the House into a bunch of iPad kids, so that's been fun for me. This bill has passed the House of Representatives unanimously in a vote of 107 to nothing, and is currently in the Senate. It's stalled a little bit, but that's okay. We're all right. and we're working on a game plan moving forward. So I'll stop there ahead of time and hand it over to Jen, who I think's got a lot of really good intel to share as well.
Thank you so much. And I do have just a small number of slides, so I'm going to share my screen here if that's okay. And trust me, they are not fancy. Okay. So thank you so much, Ryan, and thank you, Denzel and Lily Mae, for the opportunity to be here. So as Denzel mentioned in the opening, I spend a lot of my time working with clean connected communities. And clean connected communities, if you're not already familiar, it's a network of individuals and organizations that are interested in fostering better land use policies and transportation approaches at the local, regional, and state level so that we can foster truly multimodal communities that are more accessible to all kinds of people, because mobility is key to being able to thrive. So I am not a lawyer. I am not a trained urban planner, and I am not a traffic engineer. But what I do have are 10 decades, not 10 decades, my goodness, 10 years of experience in local government as an elected official, first as a town commissioner and then as a mayor, working really hard with my colleagues, very much trying to foster a walkable and prosperous town with best practices in land use in the midst of an affordable housing crisis that only got worse with every year and is still getting worse. And during that time, I realized how much land use and transportation impact pretty much everything local government does, and how outdated ways of doing things that local governments are often just presented with, the tools they're presented with, often present local governments with less than ideal set of choices that they have to choose between. And good land use is just key to creating the kinds of communities that most people say that we want to live in. So what are parking minimums? Why do we have them? So the internet tells me that we have them because just based on the advent of the car over 100 years ago, and suddenly cars were becoming the main way people were getting around, and they needed to be managed in some way because cars were kind of parked all over the place. Think of parking chaos. That is the extent of my knowledge of the history behind it. But basically, what we have now in local governments are mostly parking minimums, which just as they say, that means there's a minimum number of required spaces that a developer must include in any project. And these minimums often end up reflecting kind of the highest end number of what might be needed in any given project, big or small. And so in the most extreme case, you can imagine the big box store that is only half full in the parking lot 363 days a year, and then on Black Friday and Christmas Eve it's full and you might have to drive around for a while to find a spot. But what this means is that if you have parking minimums as your standard, that's accommodating of single occupancy vehicles in nature. So there's this underlying assumption that we should be able to find a place to park our car everywhere we go, however many vehicles and drivers we may have in our household. There's no incentive to take a different mode or to demand a different status quo be implemented by policymakers. I also just want to make a note here that not everyone is presented with the same amount of choices. Many people can't drive because they can't afford a vehicle, they're very expensive, or they're unable to drive for any number of reasons. So most people say we want the top. Okay, this picture up here is what people like kind of describe. This is lovely Hillsborough. Also, you might imagine these buildings were built a very long time ago with a very different set of conditions. And so what we end up with is often something that looks more like here down below. And with more parking comes more problems. So in addition to the aesthetic issues that this causes, which I want to say is not unimportant, all people want to live in somewhere that feels good and looks nice and that they want to be in. But this overbuilding of parking creates a cascade of other problems. One space of surface parking will cost about $5,000 and can be a lot more. Structured parking decks can cost $40,000 or $50,000 per space. Of course, that cost is passed on to consumers. Plus, the land itself is so valuable. So instead of building more places for people to live, or more buildings where local businesses can come in and help the local economy, then we just have all this parking taking up all this valuable land. It also increases the linear feet and surface area that local governments are now responsible for. And of course, local government is taxpayer funded. And so whether it's longer sidewalks, longer locally owned roads, water and sewer infrastructure, this all adds up to significant dollar amounts that has to be budgeted for every year in terms of maintenance. And of course, as Ryan has already mentioned, it adds to stormwater runoff. It also, anytime you're encouraging, basically your lots of abundant parking encourages more cars on the road. More cars on the road is worse for emissions, and all that asphalt, of course, creates heat island effects that are not very pleasant either. What we need is less pavement so we can have more paradise. I'm being very corny here, but it's true. So dealing with parking minimums is important, and it's low-hanging fruit. But that also, I just want to remind everyone, needs other supportive policy changes and adjustments as well to really kind of manifest the potential benefits of it. So local governments should be updating their unified development ordinances to foster these compact, walkable communities. We need to repeal the ban on any state funding going towards standalone bike ped projects. And we, writ large, need more funding going to public transit, rail, and bike infrastructure, because those currently get a very small slice of the pie. And we also need the design of roads, because we still are going to have people in cars. We need to make that design safer for people outside of the cars moving around. So what can we do? The main choices here are to loosen parking minimums, which is fine. It's better than not. But usually that means kind of tinkering, making adjustments in a UDO that isn't going to really have the lowering of cost effects that other options might have. Some communities have changed to parking maximums, which is a little better. So that's, instead of saying you have to have at least this number, it's saying you decide how little you want, but don't put any more than this number. Local governments can also allow shared parking agreements. So that's like if I own a bar, you own a hair salon, we would basically be using parking spaces at different times of the day. And so we could count the same spaces towards our parking requirement. So that's fine. All those are fine. But really, with Clean Connected Communities, we definitely advocate for eliminating parking mandates, which I am sure is going to come on Oprah's 2025 favorite list of land use changes she thinks we should all implement. But eliminating those mandates is really just going to open up a lot of money to make better things happen other than building parking, and also to incentivize some of these other changes we need. And once you know, I'm just thinking about that link that Ryan dropped in the chat, once you know how much of the space around you is taken up by parked cars, I encourage folks who haven't thought about this before to think about it when you start walking around your community. You can't unsee it. And so I think awareness is really important, and we should be encouraging these changes. And that's all I've got.
Thank you so much, Jen and Ryan, for your presentations and history. Definitely love to see Oprah throw that in the bag for her Christmas list this year. This is the part where we like to turn it over to anybody who would like to ask questions or has a comment or an area of curiosity. We have these great experts who have loaned their time. This is also being recorded, so I should make mention of that you can go back and see it later. You can share it with your networks. But if you are here now and you'd like to ask some questions to these great experts who have loaned us their time, the floor is open now. So Brittany, Omega, Dorian, Meg, Charlotte, it's good to see you. My board member, Martin Johnson, thank you for being here. And Marty, anyone here who likes to ask a question, feel free.
Hi, this is Meg at Sustain Charlotte. I'm just curious about ways to kind of effectively overcome. There's often a public perception that there's not enough parking. And yeah, I know we can collect data and present information about that. And I'm, familiar with the Black Friday parking challenge where people go and take the photos of parking lots on Black Friday that are usually still have plenty of spaces. But have you seen any other effective strategies for helping to dispel the all too frequent myth that there's not enough parking?
Yes, I can dive in on that real quick. So Raleigh is a really good example. They eliminated their minimums a couple years ago. And what they saw was that your parking minimums, they restrict the parking just for the use of that parcel, that the use of that parcel. So it says, if I have a bank branch in downtown Morganton, that I can only use those parking spaces for that bank branch. By Raleigh eliminating their minimums, they said, that's your property, do whatever you want with it. And so they have actually seen in downtown Raleigh the number of public parking spots increase. Therefore, supply goes up, price goes down. So there's more parking spots now in downtown Raleigh because private property owners are allowed to do with their property what they will. So that's one example of that for sure. That's really popular. So Meg, I know you in South End, you've got a lot of, I call them ghost parking decks where you've got parking decks that aren't being used. Well, that property now can open up some of those parking spaces for public parking.
Great, thank you.
This is Omega Wilson in Mebane, that's Orange and Alamance County, a part of Jennifer's original territory. All right. Mebane is identified as one of the top 5-10 fastest growing areas in the state of North Carolina. And one of the characteristics is the massive growth and placement of some of the largest distribution facilities in the United States, right? Walmart, the Amazons, the UPSs. Now there's going to be a Food Lion distribution site that's going to be staked in part of Alamance County and part of Guilford County. It's the straddle the county line of accounting for, I think, close to $850 some million just in the physical structure. And the parking is required in the planning meetings I've been in, and I've been in a lot of them over the last 25 years. It's required as a part of the planning process, the minimum parking, and even parking for townhouses, apartment complexes is also required, not just for the residents who live in the facilities, but for fire access, police access, emergency vehicle access. All of these discussions come up on a regular basis. And in some of the areas, parking in order to for safe movement and pickup of children coming and going to school, returning from school, school buses, etc. Because if you don't have that, you have traffic jams, you have a whole lot of angry people and people backed up just trying to get in and out to work. Most recently, my wife and I were in a meeting in the city of Mebane, planning a city council meeting, where people were saying because of new development just in Mebane, some of the times It took them 10 minutes to get to the interstate from where they live, just a mile away. It was now taking them a half hour just to get to the interstate because of traffic flow and lack of adequate parking so people could just get off the highway and basically just get out of the way. I'm not sure this discussion seems to address what the reality is of the massive growth of small vehicles, medium vehicles, SUVs, delivery trucks, lawn care vehicles, tractor trailer trucks, all of this stuff integrated, and parking is necessary just to move the vehicles around, much less park. I'm confused based on what you're saying.
Take a first stab at that. And Ryan, you might have very well have things to add, especially since I think you probably talked to maybe a few legislators about this. But first of all, Omega, I just want to take note that in fast growing places, the example that you brought up in Mebane, I think is a really good illustration of how, unfortunately, the decisions that we need to be making around land use and transportation are not neat linear ones, because we have done things in one way for so long. It's really hard to change the built environment in a way that is not disruptive. And that is just, maybe there's a more politic way of of saying that, but I think that that's just a fact of the matter, that there is that there's going to have to be some kind of discomfort, which we are experiencing, before things can really change. Because, I would offer that, in Mebane and other places like that, where there's a lot of stuff happening, people are moving there, people are building stuff there, that ideally would create pressure to make some of those other changes, like not just with parking, not with just eliminating minimums, but some of those other supportive policies that I was referring to. Because there's no number of roads or parking spaces that you can build that are really going to smooth that out. Things have to be done a little differently. And I know that's not a very neat answer, but it's something I think about a lot and is worth discussing for sure.
I think too, if I could piggyback off of what Jen was saying, what we found is that this conversation is part of a bigger narrative of what's the difference between growth and sprawl, because those aren't the same thing. So if a town puts in 500 apartment units on a rural 2-lane road, that's going to increase traffic. That's going to increase the number of people is there. Dependence on your car, that is something that a local government can control. What makes absolutely no sense is areas, your downtown areas, requiring these and saying we want people to live, work, play, but then I'm required to buy an apartment that has 50 extra parking spots at $50,000 a piece, and that jacks up my rent, so I can't afford to live in downtown anyways. So this is really this is not an anti-growth measure, but this is an anti-sprawl pressure, where we can see downtowns revitalize as a part of the process, see investment come into these communities, and not require these massive swaths of land to just be dedicated to parking alone.
Thanks for the comment, but I'd just be interested in seeing you in a planning meeting with UPS, 180 acres, Amazon. I mean, these national, international corporations that deal according to specifications all over the country. How you would sit in these meetings and talk to them about how they're going to navigate their heavy duty tractors, trailers, their employees, their service vehicles, for some of the largest facilities that are being built in the United States here. With what you're saying, it doesn't sound like it makes very good sense based on what they're doing and what the growth is. I'll just leave it at that, because I'm still fuzzy, because people are growing, factories are growing, populations are growing. You have somebody like Buc-ee's is going to build in Mebane, one of the biggest service stations in the world is being built here, possibly 10,000 cars, 600 and some parking spaces alone for that level of traffic a day, interstate traffic. I'm not sure. This sounds like it fits what the growth pattern is in Mebane or in parts of North Carolina. Thanks a lot.
I wanted to make some space. I saw a couple comments. I think they were being answered by Brittany. I saw one towards the end. It says, is there any sort of before and after that addresses the shift in parking as a result of parking minimums? Ryan, I see you put that in there. Okay. Marty, I saw you come off. Is there a comment you'd like to make, sir?
Yeah, I'm in my office right now. Let's see if I can unblur. Well, I'm not very good with these filters and whatnot, so you'll just have to take my word for it that I'm sitting on the second floor of an office building and the parking lot out beside it is about 30% full. I anticipate that that's the case with most of the parking lots by which we are all sitting at the moment. And, you know, just to sort of piggyback on something that Jen said, there's a lot of sort of moving parts, including parking management, that Ryan sort of hit on, which can allow, for example, if there were additional demand close by, for the parking spaces here to be rentable by the property owner that we lease from to adjacent property or adjacent property owners and uses to fill up that parking where there's not clearly enough demand, like most every Walmart on Black Friday. I wanted to actually bump a question that was asked first by Brittany, which is just to go back. I was on a little bit late. I love the idea of parking maximums that Jen suggested. There is a little bit of delicacy, I think, associated with HB 369. And the original question that Brittany asked was, what is causing the stall in this bill? And then I would piggyback on that with another question for Ryan, I think, which is, can you talk a little bit about the nuance in terms of advocating for this bill?
Yes, Marty, thank you so much. And I have to give Marty a shout out. We had a town hall about the bill, House Bill 369 in Brevard 2 weeks ago, and a lot of it was due to Marty's enthusiasm and support for this effort. So thank you, Marty, publicly and for your continued support. So a couple of nuanced things that, Marty, I'll try and hit on and see if there's anything I didn't pick up on. One is that it's for off-street parking. This is not on-street parking. So this doesn't affect DOT, parking in front of your favorite downtown store. This is parking lots, period. Parking lots, parking decks. That's it. So in terms of where is the bill stalled, it's a little stalled right now. It is currently sitting on the Rules Chairman's desk, Senator Bill Rabin. We had a really great meeting with him last week. We think we're going to see the bill move again. The senators, we're planning for the bill to go to the State and Local Government Committee. You can Google that. I didn't have that on my quick list, but we're hoping that this will be moved again in the short session next year, next spring. That being said, we have a really cool opportunity we have candidate filing is December 1. Primaries are first Tuesday in March. So you're going to have your legislators out in your community listening, getting feedback, wanting your support, and quite frankly, wanting to talk about anything other than why didn't they pass a budget this year. So we're going to be doing a organizing digital town hall here in a couple weeks to talk more about the effort. But I think what's really cool is we're not mad at anyone right now. No one voted against the bill, so your House members get a gold star. And there's still potential for this bill in the Senate. So really just a golden opportunity to say, I learned about this bill and I'm excited about it. And I hope you'll take a look at it and consider supporting it. Marty, does that answer your question?
Yeah, sure. The other thing that occurs to me, and I think that Omega points out something really important, um, which is you can address this sort of common misconception every week in every possible legislative body in every municipality. And the thing that really excites me about this bill is that it, potentially allows us to not have to do that, have that conversation with every individual municipality. Um, so I guess my other question was, because I get really excited. I am a complete shoepista. I'm opposed to parking all over the place. And I get really excited when somebody like Jen mentions parking maximums, which uh, set a ceiling on how much parking you can have. Um, I'm prone to make a lot of noise a lot of times. And I feel like there is sort of a bit of nuance to this that means that we need to be quiet about certain things, like some sort of transportation initiatives that could piggyback and assist with clean connected communities in terms of just getting this bill passed.
Yeah, for sure. Thanks, Marty. This is a marathon, not a sprint, for sure. And so what we're looking at is one, this is not a partisan bill. It had bipartisan support when it was filed. It had a bipartisan vote, and it's had bipartisan support the entire time. So any attempt to put a partisan label on this is wildly discouraged and wildly not appreciated. So don't call it progressive, don't call it conservative, don't call it liberal, because frankly, it's all of those. There's components of the bill that touch every sort of political persuasion. So don't make it a partisan thing. Um, yeah, I guess that was my like first panic attack, and then I had a brain fart. So Marty, I apologize. So I think keeping this, the our worst case scenario is coming out of the primaries, going the lobbying team that is working on this bill, going to a senator saying, and they respond with, "Hey, this sounds really cool, but I haven't heard anything about this from my constituents." On the flip side of that, the best thing they can hear is, yeah, Ryan, that sounds great. I already heard from it. I'm a yes vote. Cool. If I can have a 30-second meeting instead of a beg and plead for 20 minutes, that's a great thing. And only you as a constituent have the power to do that. I get paid to go talk to them. You don't. And so hearing from you means a whole lot more than hearing it from me.
Uh, Ryan, can I add a piece on there just as the
Please.
table people that tries to do the left, right, and middle wrangling? I just want to give credit to Ryan for this tremendous lift and effort and his guidance and nuance of this issue. We get a chance from the table perspective, being connected to other communities, to see what this legislation looks like across the country and what it can do and how it can unlock and affect housing and transportation. One of the things that we've been made aware of, especially here in this state, is when you get some legislation that generally twists both on the right side and the left side, and everybody feels like they're giving up a little bit, it's actually really good legislation. So I just want to encourage, Marty, you or anyone else, even us, like I told Ryan, I said, we're here to support you. We're here to leverage our resources as we can. We'll take your guidance. You want us to be in the front, the back. You want us to, just, whisper to whoever. It's, it's your play, because at the core of it, one of the benefits of this, I think, piece of legislation is it has not been, as he said, contentious. And there is a lot of things that we can do. And I'm saying this as someone who used to be an activist and an organizer that is now an advocate and a lobbyist or principal lobbyist, that don't work in that space. There are certain buzzwords we know we can't use in that space. So I would really encourage you to take all the guidance that he's given and granted. I know he's had these calls so that we can kind of get through this, because what this means beyond just some of the areas that have been highlighted is a tremendous win for the state. in terms of how we properly manage land, utilize it, and get to the issue of missing middle, which is one of our key concerns with this. So, and I think Jenn knows it way better from being on city council, sitting and watching the restrictions within that. So just wanted to highlight and lift that up because we could exhaust efforts in the wrong capacity and find ourselves in the middle of a political quagmire, and only the folks who are in the building can deal with or settle or appease. So as he said, there's no enemies. No enemies right now. There is no one that's everybody's good. And that's a rare case. There are no enemies. Like we've done this work, and there's a lot of times where there's people like, we got to define them, and they are directly the enemy. There are no enemies in this. Everybody's on the good side, and that's a rare situation. We can come back next year, and it could be a whole nother bill with a whole nother issue. So I just want to give that color around the situation. So. Anyone else had any questions? Martin Johnson, I saw you. Professor Martin Johnson, I saw you come off mute. Would you like to add some points, sir?
Sure. I could add something. I was not able to listen to that meeting, but I guess one question I'm curious about, maybe for Ryan, is I know there are other places in which parking is part of state policy. Two I'll mention. One, I know with like light tech projects, you get points if you have extra parking or parking included for low-income residents, many of whom might not even have a car and might not need one if the project's in the middle of the city. So that's something that I would like to see changed. And then two, I know there are rules around what uses like parking meter fees, other things can be used for. I know like we have like a parking fund in Chapel Hill, and the revenue can only be used for parking. You couldn't use it to improve the streetscape. You couldn't, put it back in the general fund. And so that's another like kind of state law that like limits kind of like some of the kind of suggestions around like parking service district, for example. So I'm curious if you like looked any of those, or kind of like, is that something that's like on people's radars and as we think about kind of the place of parking in public policy?
Yeah, for sure. Thanks, Martin. On the LIHTC front, I spoke with several LIHTC developers, LIHTC property managers, and said, what would you do if you didn't have to have these parking minimums? Would you add units? And they frankly said, we'll actually just rip out some of the parking spaces to reduce our stormwater fees, which cool. Win for me, less impervious surface. Win for you, less stormwater fees. So there was that interest there. In terms of the metered parking fees, that's for your on-street parking, not off-street parking. But I think you would see a rise in interest in different sort of, what type of local revenue could come from this. Local governments across the table are strapped for funds right now, so anytime they can make a buck or two, I know they'd be happy to do so. So I think that metered parking is more your on-street parking, where this is more about off-street parking.
All right.